Rishi Sunak addressed the COP27 conference hours after the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson spoke at a fringe event decrying the calls from poorer countries for climate reparations. Rishi Sunak is going to have to fight to have his voice heard, while Boris Johnson remains an active politician, a political commentator has said, hours after the former Prime Minister undermined the new incumbent of number 10 in Egypt. Deputy digital political editor for the Daily Express, Dan Falvey, said Mr. Sunak is going to find frustrating the overbearing presence of the former mayor of London, citing the fact that both politicians had drawn equal headlines over their announcements at COP20, despite only Mr. Sunak having the power to enact. On Monday, while Mr. Sunak pledged to triple funding for those countries most affected by climate change, his former boss Boris Johnson accused policymakers of looking backwards regarding reparatory measures. Mr. Falvey said, "I think what Rishi Sunak is going to find frustrating about this is that Boris Johnson is probably just forever going to be there on the sidelines. We even had it when Rishi Sunak was deciding to become leader. There were questions of, was Boris Johnson going to run? Was he not going to run? He took all the headlines through that. We now have COP27. The headlines have been largely split between the two of them. I think Boris Johnson has had just as many headlines as Rishi Sunak, and as Prime Minister, he wants to make his mark but is having to jostle for position against his former boss." Mr. Falvey added, "It does mean that Rishi Sunak is going to have to fight to have his voice heard because it is not just this. There are a number of areas where Boris Johnson has made clear what his views are, and we have had allies of Mr. Johnson saying what he thinks about manifesto commitments in 2019 that need to be honored." In a short speech at the UN climate conference in Egypt, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak spoke of the moral necessity of helping those most affected by climate change just hours after Boris Johnson slammed the idea of climate reparations. Mr. Sunak promised to honor our commitments on climate finance, restating Britain's pledge to spend £11.6 billion on proactive policy between 2021 and 2025. He also promised to triple our funding to adaptation to £1.5 billion by 2025. This would involve giving money to those most affected by the changing climate, typically poorer nations such as Pakistan and regions in Africa.